One day, a patient walked into my office that had his suicide planned for that evening. And I knew I had to show up with more than just my clinical expertise, that I had to show up with my heart, with my intuition, and bring all of myself to the table in a way that I hadn't previously done. We're not wired for facts. We are fundamentally storytellers above everything else. We spend a lot of time practicing getting stressed out. We don't spend a lot of time practicing being calm. And the feelings that we have, the emotions that we have, they aren't facts. Feelings are not facts. They are fuel to get us to the next thing. We're wired for what's familiar, not what's right for us. So if failure is familiar, you might experience it more often, not because you want to, but pain and pleasure are processed very similarly in the brain in very similar regions.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Stories and Stanza. And today I have Melanie Weller as a guest for this discussion. Hi, Melanie. Welcome to Stories and Stanza. How are you doing today?
I'm well, thanks. Thank you for having me on the show, Abhra.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing some interesting concepts today. And for our listeners, I just wanted to say that this is part of the Fail With Me series as a whole, where we look at failures, understand, interpret them. And today I'll be joined by Melanie, and we'll hear from her about her journey, her thinking, and a lot about vagus nerves and astrology. So before going into the details for our listeners, could you give a brief introduction, please?
Absolutely. So 30 years in athletic training and physical therapy gifted me a reputation as the body whisperer. And no matter where I moved, I ended up treating all the people that nobody else could figure out. And I studied with world-renowned experts and collected credentials like some people collect fine wines. And still there were others I couldn't help, and I took more courses and got more credentials. And then one day my life fell apart. And none of my academic study really helped me make sense of what was happening I was having a proverbial midlife crisis. I had a health crisis, a marriage crisis, and a lawsuit crisis, all in very close proximity. And one day a patient walked into my office that had his suicide planned for that evening. And I knew I had to show up with more than just my clinical expertise, that I had to show up with my heart, with my intuition, and bring all of myself to the table in a way that I hadn't previously done. And 90 minutes later, he walked out 90% better. And I walked out with my fearless presence. And we really saved each other that day. And since then, I've been on this mission to really help people unite modern and ancient science, because it makes miracles.
Thank you. And from my observation, I have seen that there's always this conflict between modern and ancient wisdom. And I feel that somewhere we need to come closer with acceptance as opposed to contradict one another.
Absolutely. Well, when you look at ancient wisdom through systems like astrology and even acupuncture points and other aspects of like Ayurveda and traditional Chinese medicine, if you look at the descriptions as allegories or metaphors, for anatomy and physiology, they are saying the exact same thing that modern neuroscience or that modern science says. And that's what I really love bringing together. And for all of the wonderful technical science that exists in the world right now, for a lot of people, it's not really accessible to them because we're wired for story. We're not wired for facts. We are fundamentally storytellers above everything else. And the thing that makes a story really interesting when you read a book or see a movie or watch a TV show or go to a play is the contrast in it. If there was not enough contrast in a story, you would find it boring. And contrast is the language of the nervous system. Neurons fire or they don't. There's no in between. They work on an all or nothing rule. And your nervous system will not let you live a dull story. And when we can really connect with the story we're living, we really then have a bigger chance to edit it or make peace with it or to see it through a different lens. And it can create really profound healing.
I cannot agree more with that. And before we get into understanding the ancient wisdom, can you help us understand what vagus nerve is? And then we will go
Absolutely.
into the ancient wisdom side of things.
Your vagus nerve is the biggest part of your parasympathetic nervous system, and which means that when it helps calm you, and it's your grace under pressure nerve. It comes out of your brainstem and it goes down to your heart and then loops back up to your vocal cords. So I like to think of it as the nerve that allows us to speak our hearts. It's in our lungs and in almost all of our organs. It is in our digestive system. It's the nerve that makes the muscles of the digestive system move food through us. It helps us absorb water and absorb nutrients. We can't absorb vitamin B12 without it. It's very involved in sexual arousal. And we all know when our vagus nerve is not working very well, because that's when, like if you've ever been speaking in front of a group of people and had a little bit of stage fright and you get that lump in your throat and your palms sweat and your heart's racing and your stomach is churning, that all happens because your vagus nerve got dialed down and your fight and flight responses got dialed up.
And we have explored some of those areas quite a bit in this podcast. I truly understand the importance of the parasympathetic nervous system. And I have, after you referred me to the literature you shared yesterday, and I was looking at it, and I was thinking that you have this wonderful mapping of different organs and vagus nerves with astrology. Before we get into astrology, I wanted to understand, like, in terms of neuroscience, we say that the parasympathetic nervous system, the vagus nerves, is so important for our body, for our well-being, for our emotional intelligence, and a whole lot of things. As a professional who have coached athletes and so many clients over the years, how do you feel that we can keep the nerve healthy, keep ourselves focused on well-being?
For me, the most important part of it is making sure that it has enough space to move, because it can get pinched inside of our bodies, especially where we have horizontal anatomy, like our diaphragms are horizontally across our rib cage and our vocal cords are horizontal across our neck. And so there are several thresholds through the body where your vagus nerve gets trapped a little bit more easily than others. And so if you can give the nerve the space to move, then it works with you and you don't have to work quite so hard to get it to cooperate. There's a lot of great nervous system exercises out there, and it is important we get better at what we practice. And so we can train our nervous system to respond in better ways. But I'm always really interested in how we get the fastest change and what's the shortest path to your highest potential. And maybe you don't have to train quite so many repetitions to get to where you want if you give that nerve the freedom that it needs. So, for example, one of the places that can get compressed is towards the backside of your heart. And what happens then is when people take a breath, they aren't able to put any air in the backside of their rib cage. And so I will have them do an exercise, right? Like I usually have them kind of spiral themselves up, kind of twist to the left a little bit, and cross their left ankle in front of their right and put their left hand behind their head, because in all humans, the right side of the diaphragm has more muscle mass than the left. So theoretically, the right side will always win. And so when you go to the left a little bit, it just takes you out of that right-sided diaphragm dominance. And then to breathe, to inhale into the backside of your heart so that you start to stretch it out and start to find the space there to breathe. And that exercise, just doing even 3 or 5 repetitions of it, where I have people inhale for maybe 3 seconds, hold for 5 seconds, and exhale for 8 seconds. And it can create really massive systemic change in the body that's really lovely, where it loosens up the neck and it loosens up the shoulders and it loosens up the breath and it loosens up the hips. And you get these really beautiful changes. And there's other more specific exercises for more specific compression points and issues that different people have. But if you can give it the freedom to move, because where I think the best way to think about your vagus nerve is that it's the pendulum of your clock. And in the scientific literature, excuse me, time perception and processing is the common thread at the root of mental health diagnoses, neurological diagnoses, and orthopedic diagnoses. So if you can get time organized in your body, in your brain, then life tends to be better. It creates a lot of resilience when you have time organized. But certainly when we're dysregulated, time is not organized in our bodies or brains at all. And so this is really the intersection of the ancient and modern science too, because ancient sciences were all rooted at some level in astrology. And even if you don't believe in astrology, the zodiac is a clock. And the sun moves around the zodiac every year. And I really, when I look at medical astrology, for example, like it's so obvious to me how well they understood time and cycles of time and subcycles of time. And the remedies are so brilliant and align with modern neuroscience too.
I will go back to what I got to know about the breathing exercises almost 20 years ago. And it took me half of my life to understand what it truly means and what we can use to our advantage with all the breathing exercises. And you also talked about just now, like giving the vagus nerve that room to expand and make us feel better. Is it possible to keep the vagus nerve engaged from time to time? Is that possible?
It's like your vagus nerve is always engaged at some level. And certainly our different life experiences, our traumas and our good experiences and our challenging experiences, or high contrast, like a high contrast we call trauma or we call it joy in life. It is both. And it creates timestamps on our nervous system. And so we can, but yes, your vagus nerve is always there for you. But we spend a lot of time practicing getting stressed out. We don't spend a lot of time practicing being calm.
That is so true. Yes.
And sometimes when you've had enough trauma or enough stress, you sort of forget what calm felt like. And it can take a little bit of effort to remember that. But if you do, like, just sitting and breathing and focusing on your breath is a vagus nerve exercise.
Thank you for throwing light on something very fundamental to our core. I believe that the existence and the function of vagus nerve and how they kind of get interrupted with our memories, trauma, and a number of other negative experiences. And in this section or in this series of the podcast, I try to unpack failure. So there are all these things that we label as failures, which can be stress, that it can be burnout, and can be trauma. A number of things that we label as failure, put it in a box, and then be scared to look at it. And then you talked about a beautiful turning point of your personal life, as well as finding that purpose. I want to hear from you as a coach and as someone who works with people, how does that idea of fail with me sit with you, as in opening up about it, understanding it, and then looking at it in different light?
Well, it can certainly be very painful. I don't want to minimize how painful failure can really feel. I will start with that it's going back to contrast as the language of the nervous system, and failure is one way we create contrast in our lives. Success is another contrast. Like, you are living a best-selling story in a blockbuster movie, but failure can come with a lot of emotions, like shame, for example. And in nervous system terms, it can be really important to do some exercises to try and rewire that shame. And we all know intuitively what shame looks like, or what it looks like when somebody's walking in shame, that their head is hanging down, their shoulders are rounded, their eyes are looking towards the ground. And we all spend all day now in a shame posture looking at our phones, reinforcing shame circuits. And just doing something in the opposite direction, like looking up, gazing up, literally helps to rewire shame in your brain. And the feelings that we have, the emotions that we have, they aren't facts. Feelings are not facts. They are fuel to get us to the next thing. And in my own life, certainly having a lawsuit against me felt like a huge professional failure. And when I really took some time to figure out, like, what I was going to do if I lost my professional license, and what were my parents going to think? What was everyone else going to think? And there's, especially those people that I had the longest history with, I was afraid of disappointing with that. But I really took it as kind of a course correction, okay, well, there's something else clearly that I'm supposed to be doing with my life. Or there's, like, can I spin this? And spin is such a cold kind of word to use, but, like, is there another way to look at this situation, that the universe, that I've not failed, that I'm getting guided in a different direction? And how do I take steps in this other direction? Or it's highlighting what I needed to heal. And I think, but for me, when I experience failure now, or have a new trauma, or maybe even a small trauma that feels like it opens up a portal to a new level of my old trauma, I really try to go, oh, isn't that interesting? Like, look at how much power I have to create something absolutely terrible that feels awful. How can I use that power to go in the opposite direction? And well, I'll pause there for a second. Am I making sense? Or I know I'm
No, you definitely are. And I just wanted to add one thing for anyone who's listening to this episode, that when we are talking about failures, we are not glorifying failure, or we are not saying that, you are at a vulnerable place. We are saying that it is possible to rewire from there. It is possible to rethink, and it is possible to repurpose. And you are also saying the same thing, that it's possible to pivot. It's possible to spin this in a different way.
absolutely there. I think whether one good example that I use sometimes, like during that time I was in therapy, and I had a dream that I was being kidnapped, and it was a very vivid dream, lots of color, lots of detail. And I told my therapist, and she said, Melanie, were you being kidnapped or rescued? And you could have picked my jaw up off the floor, because I looked at the dream in an entirely new way. And it was very easy to tell the story about how the people that I thought were kidnapping me in my dream were probably really rescuing me.
Very true. So the messaging that I try to carry in this podcast is failure needs a little bit of unlearning. And then once we know what it is, we know there are ways to change directions from there.
Oh, absolutely. Right. We're wired for what's familiar, not what's right for us. So if failure is familiar, you might experience it more often, not because you want to, but pain and pleasure are processed very similarly in the brain in very similar regions, and we kind of can get them mixed up. And our subconscious really, these are very subconscious patterns that can it seems like life isn't working out, but your subconscious is just on repeat, basically. Or you have the fears, like that's joy and success and all the things that you want, your nervous system can literally feel threatened by those things. And so learning ways to retrain your nervous system so that joy feels safe, so that success feels safe, is really important. And your subconscious is not logical. It's not, you may want a job promotion, or you may want to start your own business. You may want to go on vacation in Greece or something like that. But your body might not be on board with that. And so there are ways to train your nervous system and to work with your beliefs to repattern those. And our old traumas really work in very sneaky ways to make the things that we want, that we really desire, and the things that we really think are possible for ourselves a little bit harder, and sometimes a lot harder to get.
Very well said. Well, I had a few difficult years, both me and my wife. And when I look back at that time now, I feel that I had a clouded vision. So I was not thinking from the vagus nerve, or not thinking from a logical mind per se. I was always clouded by this fear, anxiety, and frustration, that layer of stressed and insecure. When I started understanding this slowly and I came out of that phase, and it was magical to me, that turning point, and that's something inspired me to create this podcast. So you had a very beautiful journey about your self discovery and finding the key to this ancient knowledge. So you started on that turning point. Could you tell us in details about how that happened?
So in the midst of my midlife crisis, I turned to astrology because my life wasn't making sense. And I thought, well, maybe astrology would help me make sense of all of this nonsense that was happening. And when I was continuing to work and teach, and one day I pulled out a picture that I've showed patients for, at the time I've had this textbook for almost 30 years. So it was showed them a picture. It's an MRI of the ventricles of the brain, and the ventricles of the brain make cerebral spinal fluid. And after I started studying astrology, just for my figuring out myself, I knew that there were different body regions associated with astrology, like Aries rules the head and Taurus rules the throat and Leo rules the heart. And anyway, I'm an Aries in Western astrology. And when I opened this anatomy book, and looked at this image of the ventricles of the brain, I thought, oh my gosh, they look just like the ram's horns that represent Aries. And I had been doing some reading about how mythology was a mode of communicating scientific information. For example, the ancient Egyptian myth of Isis and Osiris is the story of the Earth's precessional cycle. It's a scientific story. It's just told in story form because they knew it would continue to be told and it'd be passed on through generations in story form. I don't know if anyone's going to want our data in 1,000 years for all the data that's being collected right now, but people we are wired for stories. And so I was in this space about where science and story were kind of the same, were the same thing. And when I looked at that picture, I thought, oh, where's the rest of it? And sure enough, it was all there, right, hidden in plain sight. Our throat anatomy looks like the Taurus bull, and Taurus rules the throat. Our aortic arch is the same shape as the symbol for Leo, and Leo rules the heart. Our kidneys sit in our low backs like a set of scales, which is the symbol for Libra. And the populations, particularly in the US and Australia, and I would assume other countries too, though I don't have the data for that, but I do know in the US and Australia, the populations with the highest levels of social injustice have the highest levels of kidney disease. So we embody the stress of injustice, however we experience it, at the level of the kidneys. And it works this way through the body in the order of the zodiac, head to toe. It works inside the cells as well. For example, a molecule of ATP that's the energy source for all cellular function is the same shape as the Aries constellation. And it's the same archetypal function. ATP has a very Aries function. It's an energy source, an initiation molecule, and it's fuel. And so all of these, so I created a form of energy medicine out of all of this that I've mixed it, certainly. My training is very osteopathic in nature, so I have a lot of manual skills. But fixing the zodiacal relationships in the body ended up getting me at least the same or better results with patients, that they were getting better faster. They were getting more range of motion and less pain and needing fewer visits with me to achieve the goals that they wanted. And so this, it's just been my passion, and really this way to look at the body through the lens of time, that your body's this clock. You're made in the image of the zodiac. I deal with a lot of people that have religious trauma. And so when I think about spiritual texts that say that we're made in the image of God, like we are literally geometrically made in the image of the sky. And most of us, if not all of us, have too much light pollution to see that now. We've forgotten. And it's just the detail that it goes to which it goes is really extraordinary, that molecules in smaller parts of the sky, like the way Vedic astrology has nakshatras, has 27 of them, that the stars in those little bits of the sky are the same shape as our amino acids and our nucleotides and little teeny molecules within, and our brainstem and cerebellum look like the Hindu deity Ganesh, and Ganesh is the remover of obstacles. And that's what our brainstem and cerebellum do. Ganesh is an archetypal story of our brainstem and cerebellum. And in Western astrology, the story of the Nemean lion that Heracles fought in his 12 trials describes blood flow through the heart, just in archetypal terms, not in literal scientific terms, the way that we would describe it today. So ancient and modern science are really saying the same thing. And it's really, at the end of the day, all about how time moves through I think we're kind of like fish that don't know that the water exists, that we're really swimming in time. And I understand the constructs and other aspects of it, but these stars in stories are just so incredibly alive in our bodies, and they can be reorganized and repatterned to help heal trauma and help you claim the time that you really want in your life. Like if you want more joy, we probably all instinctively know that if we want more joy, that's like we want our hearts to be lighter. That joy lives somewhere in our heart area. And Leo in astrology rules the heart, and it's joy, and it's naturally associated with joy and play and children. And so if you want more joy and playtime in your life, then you can apply vagus nerve and nervous system exercises more at the level of the heart. If you want more spiritual time, you might do more foot exercises, because Pisces is the spiritual home of the zodiac and rules the feet. And so you can really use these archetypal terms, archetypal energies, archetypal ways of thinking, and combine them with the science, with the neuroscience, and use them to help time move more smoothly through you, and you move more smoothly through time, so that you can have more of what you want.
Before we understand this a little bit more, for our listeners, can they read about it somewhere? Have you published your research?
Yes. If you go to my website, which is my name, melanieweller.com, there is a Zodiac and the Vagus Nerve workbook there that's completely free. Sign up and you can download that, and it has pictures and exercises all the way through. And I really think that where the compression comes in, and this way, if you don't know astrology, this isn't going to make a lot of sense, but the Vedic system is very different than the Western system, or the stars they put the planets in different positions. It's about 24 degrees different. Vedic or sidereal astrology is where the planets actually are. Western is based on the vernal equinox, so things are kind of in the same, or the sun at least is basically in the same degree throughout every year. And I think that tension between those two constructs is what causes the compression in the body. And that's what we're really harmonizing, is our relationship between how we're fundamentally wired and how we show up. And certainly, I think a lot of people could identify that any struggle that we have is how we feel on the inside versus what's happening outside of us. And how do we bring those inner and outer worlds together?
What you said, I just remember that as some of my previous episodes, there were like pointers that came up in sync with the concepts that we are talking about. One of the most important ones was understanding generational trauma. So something that we may have, it's not something we experienced ourselves, but we inherited that. So it was very interesting to hear that there can be trauma that is not our own and
it is very real, and you can objectively assess that in your body as well. And that's another aspect of time. That's something that's very old, that happened before you physically existed, is alive in your body. They've done these studies on humans, but my favorite study is a mouse study where they trained a male mouse to be afraid of the smell of cherry blossoms. And its grand mice were still afraid of the smell of cherry blossoms, even though they had no exposure to cherry blossoms. So your fears, your anxieties, your depression, your pain is very often not entirely, or maybe not at all, your own. And one way that for example, that I like to play with this with my patients and clients is I'll have them put a hand on the front of their chest, or if they can, to also put a hand on the back of their chest, and to take a couple deep breaths just to feel how they're breathing. And if they have, most people when they start, well, I'll just say I do sometimes give some rules, but just to assess how they're breathing. So like when I do this, I get really nice, I practice what I preach. And so I get really nice expansion forward and back in my rib cage. But in the midst of all of my own crisis, I have a very difficult relationship with my mother. And I've had a lot of foot pain too. And my mom has had foot pain, and my grandmother had foot pain. And so I have this generational foot pain thing happening. But I just asked my body, I said, how is my mother breathing in my body? And I got a completely different movement pattern. I breathed a completely different type of breath. That, instead of being nice and expansive, like it was all very constricted and my shoulders moved up. And so adding some intention, and the science of intention is incredible, but setting the intention that when I was doing my exercises, that I was doing them for how my mother was breathing in my body. And I was really able, I see this over and over, that we all let other people live rent-free in our nervous systems. Not just in our head, whether that's your boss, your sibling, your partner, your child, your friends, old ex-lovers, and to really regulate for that is incredibly powerful. And if you're somebody that believes in past lives, you can apply this to past lives. And it can really start to unlock it's time-related trauma. Like these times, it can soften these timestamps that you're carrying that are not even yours.
That is so true. When I first heard about it, it seemed unbelievable. But then, as you reflect more on this and you open up your mind to the possibilities, then you realize that that's possibly where some of our own fears and trauma or mental blocks are coming from. And I'm very curious, when you started on this path of astrology and you started understanding this, started understanding the connection between our physiology and astrology, then was that knowledge helpful for people you train or people you coach?
Absolutely. Like enlightening, because you get to the root of the problem much faster. And when you can treat the root, then the rest, all of the heaviness, all of the other things that you've layered on top of it just shed away. And for example, like the man I told you about at the beginning who had his suicide plan for that night, it was very easy to say that he was living in rigor mortis. Like he was moving his body. He was so limited in his movement and in those astrological energies and the ways his kidneys were moving. First, like his kidneys weren't moving, they were frozen. And getting all of that, the zodiac lined up in his body and getting his vagus nerve decompressed, our bodies inform our brain like about how we're thinking, and you can't have a different way of thinking unless you change something about the body. And I've seen this over and over, that when you get these astrological energies lined up in people, they are able to think differently. They're able to have less pain. They're able to move better. And I have lots of other ways that I could fix people too, but this particular, the way that I apply treating the zodiac in the body works as good or better than anything else I've been exposed to. And I've been exposed to some pretty amazing things. And so I'm really passionate about, I think this is our fundamental science that's been hidden in plain sight. This is treating really, like for me, fundamentally, it's treating consciousness. And so I think what really happens is that I help people shift their consciousness so they become somebody who wants to live, or they become somebody who is free of shoulder pain.
This is very interesting. This knowledge is fantastic. And you just said that understanding this has made a big difference, and it has reflected in getting the results quicker, getting the results sooner. And I just wanted to go back to the beginning of something we just touched upon at the start of our chat today, that you said about the mind-body connection. And you have been working with the body for a long time. And then with the knowledge of astrology and knowledge of nervous system, it has improved and widened over time. So what do you think about today's in today's situation? What is the mind-body connection, and how we can take care of our well-being, how we can make sure that we do the right level of self-care when it talks about keeping the balance between mind and body? I wanted to hear your experience, and given that you have worked on it for such a long time.
Well, I think your body is your mind. And you can only have the thoughts that you're able to move through your body. And I think it's really, well, we're kind of so silly to like when we talk about mind body or body brain connection, to talk about like our mind or our brain like it's not part of our body, I think doesn't necessarily serve us. But our brains are 80% input from our bodies. They're only 20% output. So if you want your mind or your brain, like if you want to, like if you're someone that, say once, we'll go back to an example I used earlier, like if you're somebody that wants a promotion, you need to start moving like somebody that has the promotion, that there's a different movement. Or if you're struggling with failure and you want to succeed, try walking in a different way. What does somebody who's successful, how do they walk through the world? And just play with it. And you will, if you just go play with it, you will pick a different movement pattern. And if you stick with it, you will start informing your brain differently, and you will have a different mindset around it all. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. What I feel is that it is impossible to separate the two and think that this is my physical wellness, this is my mental wellness. I see all these discussions on mental health and stuff, and I think that if you ignore that bridge, if you ignore that bond, it is almost impossible to come out with a solution. When you see that your body is reflecting your mental state, and your mental state is carrying the weight of something in your body, then it gets like very difficult. So that's my take. I totally.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, they are absolutely not separate. It's the silly, like we think we're so smart, and we're just so silly, I think, sometimes in how we describe these things, and even the solutions that we come up with. Like the zodiac astrology is really the same thing as the hero's journey, and it's the same thing as a 12-step program. And we recreate these same systems in different ways to help us find this mind-body connection, to find wholeness. And the mental health research overwhelmingly says that talk therapy only works if you add a body component to it. Whether you work with a therapist that has somatic training, or you do therapy and yoga, or you do therapy and exercise of some kind, that you have to combine that to get really meaningful results. Enlightenment is 100% through the body. And that's, for example, part of what Tantra is about. And even yoga, that enlightenment is through your body, through working with your body and doing the yoga, breathing practices and rituals and things like that. And so the more you can work with your body, and we just don't pay attention to our bodies. We know more about our cars most of the time than we know about our bodies, or we take better care of our cars. We go in for oil changes and things like that, but we don't really spend a lot of time in our bodies, and we abuse them. Those pain and pleasure circuits get mixed up, and we eat too much and drink too much and eat junk food and things that aren't really serving us.
Yes. I look back at my difficult phase of my life, and then I see that I was very stressed and I was not sleeping well, not digesting well. And then when I realized that it's coming from my body, and I started exercising, being more active, being more engaged, and I realized that all the other symptoms I had, the stress, that frustration, that anger, all of that was dissolving. So I could see this very clearly that it's not one without the other. It's just that I feel it's often misinterpreted in popular beliefs that there is
Absolutely.
yes.
Yeah. Well, we're all very different too. We're all, have different life experiences and or like same and different, and we all want to feel special. There's when we're really none of us are special, or we're all so much more similar than we are different. And some models of the universe model it as a big brain, so that the universe is like just like us. And there's incredible research about how solar and space weather affect our bodies. And so when I think about this mind-body connection, like we're all these little brains living inside of some big brain we're all together part of this bigger body. And some of us are nerve cells and some of us are muscle cells and some of us are lung cells, and we're all functioning in this bigger system, I think. Or that's what when the physicists come out with the models of the universe as a big brain, it's like, well, where's the rest of the body? Like, we don't know what's beyond that. But I think that we are always the invitation for connection is always there. And the more that you can just be in your body, and you're never really not in your body, but to really be home and to make your body this home that feels good to you, I think is really sets up well, and we do that a lot through spiritual practices. Historically, that's what spiritual practices have done. They make you feel at home in your body and at home in your community. And I could talk all day long about the science of spirituality and the benefits of spirituality on mental health, like especially no other intervention can touch it. But your body is a spiritual practice. And I think that our deepest grief, or our deepest longing is for all of us, is for our mortal relationship with our immortal self.
That would take like a full day of discussion, I guess.
I know. That's a big topic, but it's all like it all just threads. So the science and the spirituality and the mind-body connection and the mindfulness and the rituals and the presence, like they so beautifully all tie in and with each other. And it doesn't have to be hard. Like the simple things, like just breathe, stop and smell the roses, taste your food, feel your breath, feel the ground under your feet, be in your feet as you walk. And those very simple things can create a lot of change.
That is true. We talked about many things, starting from wellness, nervous system, vagus nerves, exercises, breathing exercises, and then finally astrology as well. Do you think that we missed something that we plan to talk about?
No, I think we definitely hit a lot of things, but I have a closing thought when.
Sure. Yeah, please. Yeah.
So one of my favorite proverbs is from Tribe in the Andes Mountains. And I think it's the truest statement about how time works relative to our bodies. And they say that your future is behind you, propelling you forward. And your past is in front of you, waiting for you to make peace with it and clear your way. And We all typically think that our future is something that we have to chase, like it's our prey, but really it's prey. That our future is catching us. And so when you breathe into the backside of your heart, to imagine that you're breathing into your good future, that you're inviting it to come through, and to allow the universe to support you. We all know the experience of tripping over your past. We've done that a lot. And certainly when we fail, that's very often very much what it feels like. But to just breathe into your back and allow the universe and your future to support you, it can be incredibly regulating to your nervous system.
Thank you. That was deeply poetic and beautiful. I'll have to note it down. Just keep it in my journal so that I can refer back to it anytime I want. And for our listeners, thank you for joining us today. And I'll have the website and other social details in the episode description for anyone who wants to connect with you, know more about your work. And thank you once again, Melanie, for joining us and sharing such wonderful wisdom.
Thank you so much, Abhra, for having me on. I very much appreciate it.